everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by Dan Dix of Press for Truth, who's had a hell of a last month, really. I think, what have you been attacked or accosted by groups of people on, 3 occasions in the last month?
At the least, yeah.
So, as many of you might have seen, Dan Dix got arrested and assaulted at a Black Lives Matter rally in Vancouver recently. He was covering it for several hours and basically just interviewing people and, getting people's take on the situation when some insane person came in and accused him of being a white supremacist. I'll let you take it away from there, Dan. Can you tell the viewers who aren't yet aware what happened?
Sure. Well, to kind of take it back to the beginning for a little bit of context for the viewers, about a week ago, there was a Black Lives Matter rally, which I went to cover. And at one point in the day, one individual in particular, who was surrounded by people all dressed in black with black masks, pointed me out, singled me out, and just said, "This is a bad man, everybody block him." All of a sudden, I was surrounded by about a dozen people or so who were all chanting, Nazi go home and things like that. I made a video explaining that whole scenario. That was last week. This week, just a few days ago, there was another Black Lives Matter rally going on, and thousands of people were expected to show up. So, of course, I'm going to go. These are the types of events I always cover. And one girl in particular started out by saying, "Excuse me, isn't this you on the phone right here?" And she's showing a clip of me from last week. And I said, "Yeah, that's me being surrounded by a bunch of Antifa thugs accusing me of being a racist. Yeah, that's right. That's me." And she says, "Well, you're a known white supremacist." And that's when everything really started to kick off. And I said, "Well, how do you know that? I mean, you don't know me." And all of a sudden, I started getting surrounded again. And one girl in particular, Josh, decided to chime in and say, "I believe black women, no matter what. She says you're a white supremacist, so I'm going to believe that. I believe black women. You don't question a black woman when she says that you are suspected of being a white supremacist." So just like that, the mob mentality began to kick in, and they began to swarm around me, and we started to see dozens turn into about 100 at that point. That's when police took notice, and they decided to intervene on the situation, or essentially to create a divide, a little inner circle to essentially protect me from the crazy mob. Mm-hmm. And when things started to escalate to that degree, at one point, the police took the decision to just grab me and begin forcefully removing me from the situation. And I tried to plead with them to say, "Look, I understand it's getting hairy. Things are escalating quickly. I'm ready to leave, but let me walk out on my own." It justifies it in the minds of this massive mob that I'm this white racist supremacist if you're violently taking me out. And that's one of the major issues that I have with the arrest, which we can talk about in a bit, Josh. But the way the mob mentality just grew so fast was absolutely shocking, to the point where I found myself surrounded by hundreds of people who were just, the anger in their eyes was insane.
I'll never forget that one guy standing there with it looked like a cross on him. I guess he was a medic or whatever, but he was standing there and he says, "We are many, you are few." And it just seemed like something out of like a Twilight Zone episode.
I know. It seemed like the zombies like, "Whoa."
It was literally that. Yeah. Yeah, well, and I do want to point out, and of course, you lost your GoPro camera, and people could check the links below. There's a GoFundMe for Dan Dix after losing some gear that obviously is very important for his work. So go check those links below for that, and also just join us generally on other platforms like BitChute and Flote. I might as well throw that in there right now as well, because our days on YouTube are numbered. But I want to point out, I mean, Dan, you are a Christian. It's really difficult for a Christian to be racist. I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there that, are extreme and they don't actually follow the words of the Bible. And, there's obviously the stereotypes that we've heard many times before. But I mean, if you're a Christian, you look at all people as equal, not like all people as equal as far as opportunity goes and as human beings, depending on what they do or do not do. I mean, can you just go into just this attack on you for being racist, because this has been going on for a few years and it's based on absolutely nothing?
Yeah, based on absolutely nothing. And I'm a turn the other cheek kind of guy. I was not about to get aggressive or violent with them in any way, shape, or form, even if they were going to become so with me. And I knew that. And that, you know, I knew if anything happens to me, there's no way I'm going to attack back. Because that's essentially kind of what they're looking for is a fight. And it's just generally not in my nature anyways. I am a peaceful guy. And that's why I said to them, challenge them really. I challenge you to find anything I've ever said or ever done which would make you think that I'm a racist or a white supremacist. And to this day, nobody has been able to provide anything. I continuously put this challenge out because it's a very serious accusation to call someone a racist and a white supremacist.
And it stems from word of mouth. It is that mob mentality that we saw there that day. I mean, years ago, you covered some events where I remember Lauren Southern got a bottle of urine poured on her head, and that video went viral, and people take that, you as a reporter, you as someone who's documenting something, as somewhat of a white supremacist, literally just for recording something that happened with other people that are not you, and they conflate you with other people. And see, that's one of the craziest things, is that if anyone knew anything about you, you had that poster over your shoulder there, Into the Fire. I mean, you put out one of the most hard-hitting police documentaries ever. You won awards for it. That was 10 years ago. And it literally shows police provocateurs, and it really exposed so much at the G20 in Toronto. I mean, so what happens when 10 years have gone by and suddenly you have kids that were 3 or 4 years old when that movie came out, flipping you off, calling you a racist, and have never been involved in activism until the media told them to?
That's the crazy part about this whole thing, is that rally essentially was an anti-police brutality rally. I mean, let's really call it for what it was. It was, you know, pro Black Lives Matter, sure, but it was also largely anti-police brutality. And as you said, I made a film about the Canadian police state, and I would suggest the film on the Canadian police state and any kind of police brutality. If these kids knew anything about my background, about what I've been bringing to the table as far as exposing what they want exposed, they may think differently of me. Because, yeah, as you said, I mean, I've been exposing the police state for well over a decade now here in Canada, and they clearly know nothing about me because I'm on that side of this argument.
Well, before we get into the arrest and essentially, I mean, you had people throwing things at you and the faulty charges that were originally leveled against you, I want to ask, because you did that documentary, what your thoughts are on the potential of police provocateurs being involved in this, because it would be so easy. And obviously you expose police provocateurs. It would be so easy for someone to come in. And of course, I don't have any evidence of this. I'm just putting this out there. I'm floating the idea of someone coming in and saying, you're a white supremacist, because they knew that people would just cling on to it and it would become an escalated situation.
Yeah, silencing me is the goal, right? And there were a number of instances throughout that event where we saw that. One example is the guy who came up with the speaker blaring some kind of mainstream pop music. There's a tactic there to drown out my voice, but also to attempt to give me a copyright strike so that the video can be taken down immediately. On top of that, Josh, I'm being followed by a number of guys in black who are watching me, and friends of mine began to note and point out that a lot of people, when they would see me go by, would take my photo, and then they would start, you know, very quickly texting someone or calling somebody, and they just started to seeing a repeating pattern of that. And my friends started seeing, guys, Dan, people are taking photos of you, and then they're like calling or texting people. I think they're collaborating and trying to figure out how to get a bunch of people on you. And so when I was notified of that, I left the area and I would go to another part of the you know, the area. It was a huge protest. And then eventually they would find me again. And when I was eventually surrounded, I knew it was time to go. But that's when the police led me to this park, and the crowd grew to hundreds. And that's when the officers started to strategize with me about, hey, how are we going to get you out of here? And then I got assaulted. And they made the decision then and there, and this is the big point I want to make today, Josh, is they decided it was good to kill two birds with one stone, in the sense that they knew they had an aggressive, violent, angry mob that they had to deal with. By that, I mean they had to keep happy. They had to please this mob so as to contain it. They also had an individual, myself, who they felt they needed to protect. So when I was assaulted, they made the decision to kill two birds with one stone. Let's arrest this guy in an aggressive, violent manner so that we please the crowd. And they cheered, Josh, when I was violently arrested and thrown in that paddy wagon. And they figured at the same time, we'll keep this guy safe and we'll just let him go later. But in that instance, what they did was they justified it in the minds of the masses of those heated mobs that I must be a white racist supremacist because the cops clearly are on their side. They violently grabbed me and arrested me. I must be that guy. The Vancouver Police Department has now put a target on me. I can't go to Black Lives Matter rallies anymore. I probably can't go to a number of protests anymore because in the minds of the heated mob, I am exactly what they accuse me of being because the police appeared to take their side. That is something I have a serious issue with when it comes to the Vancouver Police Department, and I may be looking forward to dealing with that in the near future, if you know what I mean.
Right, and they made it so much worse, and it's almost like they wanted to make it worse. And also, if they're on anyone's side, it was a protester's side. And look, I'm a big supporter of these protests. These protests are necessary, but obviously there's been a lot of provocateurs. There's been a lot of, misdirection. There's been a lot of identity politics that come into it, and it just completely bastardizes a whole movement. And I think that's a really important point to kind of throw out there because I've been very supportive of people rising up against police. That's something that needs to happen. However, it's how it happens. And when they turn it into a racial identity politics issue, then you have some of the worst people who have no opinions, only identities that come out and act very emotionally. They burn down people's small businesses. It's that kind of, escalating that the police did that can actually lead to those fires, lead to people destroying businesses and that kind of stuff. And that could have turned way more violent than it did. But then they gave you these crazy charges initially of, breaching the peace and an assault that you were basically sitting there. They said, do you want a lawyer? Can you go into that?
Yeah. So initially when I was arrested, I was thrown in the back of that van, taken down to the police station, and was sitting in there for about an hour or so with my hands all cramped up behind me, handcuffed. And when they eventually opened the door, they said, we're going to notify you that you have been charged. You are charged with disturbing the peace and assault. I was just shocked. I was like, wait, hang on a second. Are you confused? I'm the guy who was assaulted. I was the guy who got hit in the head. And the officer there was like, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. My job here is to inform you of your rights, yada, yada, yada. And he says, you are being charged with disturbing the peace and assault. And then he read me my rights and asked in that process, would you like to call a lawyer? And I just said, honestly, no. Why would I? No, I don't want to call a lawyer. There's no need for that. I haven't done anything wrong. He's like, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. That's within your right. Just sit tight. And then maybe another half hour later, they took me, put me in a cell. And I sat in there for a number of hours until all of a sudden an officer, the arresting officer, came in and said, all right, well, you're free to go. But let me tell you, Dan, there's going to be more of these. These Black Lives Matter rallies are going to continue. And I would strongly advise that you no longer attend these rallies because you are going to use up our resources. We're not your personal bodyguard. We do not want you going to this thing anymore. Now, you're a free citizen. You can go if you want to. But I strongly advise that you don't. And it was just like this kind of bizarre thing coming from the state. And they released me in that manner. I'm like, okay, look, I don't really want to go to these things anymore anyways, to be honest. I mean, yeah. it's getting crazy there. There's no need for me to go cover that type of thing anymore.
You got to be a sucker for punishment at this point.
Yeah, I have no interest in that anyways. But just to have the state sit there and cram down my throat after violently arresting me, was pretty disrespectful.
It's really a great example of it not being black and white, the issue not being black and white, because you have police that are brutalizing people, police, the arm of the state. At the same time, you have people who just follow whatever the media tells them to, get riled up by propaganda. They turn into these rabid people that just become, they go with the mob. And then you have them going against another problem. So you have two problems fighting a problem, and at some point you just got to go, man, maybe we should just back out of this and let these guys fight it out, because it's really getting, the whole world's insane. The last 4 months of 2020 have been probably the strangest months of everyone's lives. And I do want to point out, Dan, you got assaulted You got assaulted, what, a month ago for going to, not even a month ago, for going to an event talking about opening up the economy. People were called racist, bigots for wanting to open up the economy, selfish for wanting to open up the economy, saying that they're going to spread coronavirus by going out in like 12 or 15 people. You got someone throw something at your head, and now, like, within weeks, the whole narrative has changed, and now it's, you are racist if you don't support going out in the streets in hundreds, thousands.
The hypocrisy there is mind-boggling, Josh. Just 2 weeks ago, I'm being called a nanny killer for going out and covering these anti-lockdown protests. And as you said, fast forward 2 weeks, and now it's so brave and honorable for these protesters to do what they had to do because democracy, yada, yada, yada. We see healthcare people clapping and cheering them on now when, again, the very same people just last week were calling me a nanny killer. The Canadian health officials, Bonnie Henry and Dr. Tam, who were, basically the people who are saying I'm one of these bad COVIDiots, they're now championing, doing their own virtue signaling for these protests, saying, yeah, that's great, go protest, but please practice social distancing. You know, Dr. Tam said, it's a good, it's important for democracy for people to get out there and protest, but maybe just don't yell, because you might spit contaminated droplets of your saliva into the crowd. So yes, protesting is important. Go do that. But, maybe just bang on pots and pans. This all culminated with the George Floyd Memorial, which really ticked me off, Josh, because here we saw a bunch of politicians and celebrities now standing shoulder to shoulder to honor this man that they didn't even know. When here I have my friend here in Vancouver whose father recently died. He hasn't been allowed to visit this man in the hospital. They're not allowed to hold a funeral for this man because he wants to be buried in Ontario, and the law there is they can't have more than 10 right now. This man had 10 kids alone, so it's going to be impossible for him to have a funeral or see his loved ones. But the George Floyd Memorial is allowed to go on with non-social distancing. And I'm not saying they should be social distancing. There's no science behind the 6 feet rule. But if you're going to promote for signal virtualing purposes, this, funeral where all these grandstanding virtue signaling politicians and celebrities could, use this George Floyd protest to grandstand on and not realize the sheer hypocrisy and not allowing people to see their loved ones when they're dying or to hold a funeral here in Canada, it's just mind-boggling. And I hope people see the hypocrisy for what it is.
It's horrible. I mean, there were so many people that weren't able to see their family members in the last weeks of their life. Oh man. And this is, at the same time, there's a major headline a couple of days ago that said something along the lines of health experts say you should still not go outside unless you're going out to protest. The same people weeks earlier, if you go out to protest, you're killing grandma. YouTube was taking down any videos of people recording these protests. I mean, talk about the hypocrisy. It's absolutely insane. Rest in peace, George Floyd. But at the same time, let's also remember millions of people worldwide will die from the economic consequences of the shutdown. So where's the outrage over that? And, I think in a lot of ways, people are channeling that outrage in the wrong directions and utilizing this movement to do that because they don't have a job. They've lost their job. They've been forced inside for months. And then suddenly it's okay to go out if you go out for this reason. Dominoes have started to fall, And
I agree, Josh. I think what we're seeing today is the culmination of months of this psychological attack on the people. Lockdown measures and isolation is incredibly unhealthy for people's psyche, emotionally, spiritually, physically. They are now pent up and pissed off and ready to go take it out on the state, but they're doing it in the wrong way. So I want to, make the important point that this isn't about race. This isn't exactly so black and white. It's more so about the people versus the state. And we as voluntarists must always take the side of the innocent and the people who are being aggressed upon. So whether that be the police who are aggressing on an innocent person, I'm on the side of that guy who's innocently being hurt and against the police. But if it's the violent looters and these aggressive, dangerous people who are attacking private businesses, then I'm on the side of the private businesses and against those aggressors. So it's not all black and white. We really have to not descend into this racial divide. And we got to understand that this is top-down power control. the state is ultimately the enemy. And when we decentralize our lives more and more from that, only then will we begin to see any kind of progress moving forward.
And you'd think that our common issue of police being the arm of the state, the enforcers of the tyranny of the state, whether it's communism or conservatism, progressivism or socialism, fascism or whatever it might be, they're the ones that enforce the laws. Without the police, it is just fear. So that, I mean, you'd think that the common goals that a lot of people in the voluntarist community that are against aggression have with a lot of these Black Lives Matter protesters, you know, that we could come together to some extent in this and kind of focus our energy on the real issues, the government, the use of aggression, the use of force against individuals. But of course, people will always get riled up. They'll get into their identity politics mindset, mob mentality. And I think what happened to you is a textbook psychological case of what mob mentality is and how easy it is for that to snowball. That's extremely dangerous, and we have to start doing a better job at making sure that that doesn't happen more in the future. Dan, I appreciate you talking with us today. I know it's been insane the last few days for you, and I do appreciate you talking with us. Can you let everyone know what's coming up next for you, and what your final words are?
Well, again, I just want people to understand that we're at a dangerous fork in the road here when it comes to society potentially slipping into an all-out civil war, leading to the ability for the state to completely clamp down on everyone's rights. I mean, they're constantly talking about this potential second wave of COVID coming in the fall. If we continue to see this brew in the way it is, they may clamp down in a very serious way, saying no more messing around, zero protests, that's it. So honestly, I think people moving forward need to do this non-violently and look towards the real enemy. If you truly want to hack at the root of the problem, you can't be looking at the individual bad actors. You have to go to the top. When you work your way to the top, you find out it's the international banksters, essentially, who have been putting countries in debt, loaning them at interest, and essentially having their grip around the throats of all of society for nearly centuries now, if not more. That's the real enemy. That's the focus. So the more we can decentralize our lives away from these bankers and this governmental system, the better off we're going to be moving forward, Josh.
Absolutely. Well said. And it's amazing how basically everything we've been talking about for 10, 15 years has come to life, and we're still the crazy people. So for that reason, you know, everyone knows YouTube's taking down channels left and right, taking down Dan's videos, taking down my videos, demonetizing all of our channels. It's shadow banning. So join us on the other platforms like BitChute, like Flote.app. I really urge everyone to check those links below, and also join in on Dan Dix's GoFundMe page, which is linked below as well. I appreciate everyone watching. Hit that like button, share on social media to get around the shadow banning, and join us on these other platforms. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
My pleasure, man. Talk to you later.
Like what you see, Hero M? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribe Star. We really can't do it without you. We've been so insanely shadow banned, about 90% at this point, and 95% demonetized. As Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, comes in and says that she is shutting down quote-unquote controversial content and cutting out the views on this controversial content by 70%. She's been bragging about it. We need your help more than ever in this battle for truth in information. You guys are what keeps us alive, so we really appreciate just even $1 a month makes a huge difference. If everyone could give just $1 a month, we wouldn't even have to worry about competing against a mainstream propaganda networks.
You can also donate to our Bitcoin address on the screen for you to scan if you please, as well as in the comments and description.
Liking and sharing makes a big difference as well, and finding us on alternative social media platforms like Flote.app, that's FLOTE.app, makes a huge difference. We're at Josh Sigurdson as well as at Wham. Flote is replacing Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon all in one with encrypted private messaging, and of course monetization on videos for creators, live streams with super chats in crypto, and most of all, no algorithm, because at the end of the day, it's all about reach reach, guys. This is all about actually reaching people with the message and waking up the public. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Minds, BitChute, all sorts of different platforms. Try to follow us on as many things as possible, because very soon this channel will very likely just be completely deleted from YouTube, and you'll never see us again, and you'll be stuck with only the mainstream networks. Also, come on out and see us at Anarcho Vegas 2020 in Las Vegas, Nevada in July, where such speakers such as G. Edward Griffin and many others will be speaking. You could use promo code WHAM on your VIP tickets and save 10%, as well as buy extremely cheap tickets for just $20.20. You won't find a cheaper conference than this with such amazing names. Check anarchovegas.com for more information on that. We hope to see you out there. And anyway, I really appreciate all of you guys joining us. You make it possible for us to survive in this volatile, propagandized climate. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Thank you.